will you lead us on? We're going to go behind the other side of the lake, the little pool here. We'll walk up away from the band, behind the, in front of the skate park, and then we'll make our way towards the more countryside.
Hey, je bent Nederlander.
Ja.
Ja. Jullie ook? Nou ja, ik groeide op in Nederland. Ik heb Nederlands paspoort. Nee, ik heb een paspoort.
Used to getting on the soapbox. Where should I start? I think I'll start at the beginning by explaining a little bit of who I am and why I'm here. My name's Dr. David Nicol. I'm a consultant neurologist, work in Birmingham, and I'm here in a personal capacity. I'm not representative of any trust I work in, such as University Hospital Birmingham or Sandwell in West Birmingham. So you know where I am, but personal view. I'm also secretary to the Association of British Neurologists, so that's the specialty society for neurologists across the country. And they're the specialists that you might see if you had problems with, let's say, very problematic migraine or multiple sclerosis or epilepsy or Parkinson's disease, those sort of things, basically. So I'm not a surgeon. Don't call me a brain surgeon, because believe me, you don't want me opening up your head. And the background to this relates to Operation Yellowhammer, and you will have read the reports recently about the plans that there were in the event of no-deal Brexit. And I got involved back, this would be in January, because I'm with the Association of British Neurologists, very closely linked to the Royal College of Physicians. Now that is by no means a bunch of radicals, okay? The Royal College of Physicians were set up by Henry VIII over 500 years ago, okay? But they know a few things about healthcare. Basically in January, the Department of Health approached a variety of Royal Colleges, including the Royal College of Physicians, and just asked for volunteers to help with no-deal planning. And I put up my hand, nervously, on the basis that someone's got to do it. Before I saw anything, I actually took advice from my medical defence organisation, because I was slightly worried that potentially could I be advising about treatment which was inferior to what is in existence, which I suspect probably gave the Medical Defence Union a few things to think about. And then it would have been, I think about 13th of March, I got an email saying, strictly confidential files, are you willing to accept? I accepted. You then get sent the password, look through the files, and at one level I would say it wasn't as bad as I thought it could be, but it was bad enough. And essentially, in fact, all of this is in today's Sunday Times. you were basically given an Excel spreadsheet and given a series of drugs where there were already, there were recognised problems of stockpiling. Now, I think it's really important we don't scaremonger here. This is not every drug under the sun. This is a very short, in the case of neurology, so I'm just talking about my specialty. I don't know, all of medicine. I can only reflect my own specialty. So around about 20 different drugs, some of them tablets. One of them was an intravenous product, so not something you get in boots at the chemist in Bromsgrove. I became troubled, in fact, because there's one patient that sticks in my mind, and I can mention this because she's allowed me to speak about it. It was a patient of mine who had very bad epilepsy. I've been a consultant 17 years, and I've known her all that time. I first met her 17 years ago, at that time she had very bad epilepsy, was being admitted to hospital frequently, and it took a period of about 3 or 4 years to stabilise her treatment, and she was on 3 different drugs for her epilepsy. And actually I discharged her from follow-up almost 10 years ago, and she was fine. And then she turned up in clinic saying, one of the drugs that I'm on for epilepsy has been changed to a different brand because of shortage problems, and I ended up in hospital in status epilepticus, which is the most serious form of epilepsy. There's about, people can die in status, so it's as bad as it gets, basically. And that particular drug was one of the ones I was aware that there was a problem of stockpiling. So I was faced with an ethical dilemma about what to do about this. So I advised, and you basically were advising on essentially a traffic light system. So red was the most serious, essentially fly stuff in. Amber was more also serious, but maybe not life-threatening. Okay, and green, there wasn't a problem. So the idea was to design a plan of mitigation for in the event of no-deal Brexit. And I thought I'd dealt with that list, and then the following week, this was the week before we were due to leave in March, okay, I got another file with another list of drugs for patients with neuropathic pain. And I was thinking, how many more files am I going to get, given that we've got 8 days to go? And in fact, it was worse than that. They changed the password, okay, so I got this at 5:30 on a Thursday night, and I'm thinking, I've just lost 16 hours until that civil servant gets in, until I can advise them. It was incredibly stressful just dealing with it, and in fact I only know this now. I personally got very stressed in the whole situation, ended up having a bit of a cancer scare, going to my own GP, and had investigations for that, and I'm sure it was all just anxiety related to the planning process. Ironically, I was actually speaking at the conference at the Royal Society of Medicine on whistleblowing the very day I was about to be on a whistleblower meeting the Newsnight team in the cafe to plan how to leak stuff, because if you look on the General Medical Council website, which is the regulator for all doctors, it is quite explicit that if you have issues of patient safety concern, you should raise them. I'd already approached a variety of bodies and wasn't getting anywhere, which is why I went to the press. In fact, Newsnight offered me anonymity, which I declined because there was only one other neurologist that had access to the files, and I knew the first thing that would happen, there would be some kind of witch hunt to try and identify who it was. So I was like, game on, I'll take. What I didn't realise was, of course, as soon as this appeared on Newsnight, then there was a smear study, a smear report appeared in the Mail on Sunday, accusing Newsnight of scaremongering. And what I hadn't realised, of course, this was during the Conservative leadership campaign, and Matt Hancock was going to be wanted to be leader. So there was an absolute uproar of this. It took the BBC a week to publish the online story because there was a massive effort, basically criticising every line of that Newsnight report, and nothing was found, basically. And there it was. And then, of course, at the same time, I was actually approaching the Royal Courts of Physicians saying, you should be speaking out about this. And there was a reluctance among the Royal Courts of Physicians at that time because they didn't want to call scaremongering. But in fact, Bod Goddard, who's the president of the Royal Courts of Physicians, wrote to every single MP on the day of the vote about no deal, warning them about the very real risk of it. So they did do things, it just maybe wasn't as public as you would be aware. And then, of course, Yellowhammer happened. And it basically replicated but multiplied what I'd been saying back in early April to be true. So this wasn't scaremongering. What happened after that? First thing that Michael Gove said, oh, this is the worst case scenario. Well, one, I knew that was a lie because I was in the room when it happened. I read the report. And also, there was other stuff which isn't in Yellowhammer. In February, Stephen Hammond, Junior Health Minister, reported that they were stockpiling body bags in the event of an increased mortality rate from a no-deal Brexit. Okay, so obviously that is the worst-case scenario. And I have to say, the last 4 months, and there may well be people who, I really don't give a monkey whether you voted Remain or whether you voted Brexit, what political party you're from, but the same argument I've had every single time on this subject is people say, oh, it's fake news. I helped write the report in mitigation, okay? This is a government report. I know, but I know some in the NHS, they voted Brexit, they tell me it'll be fine. Have they read the report? So I found it a strange, bizarre state that we can be against the idea of big government and yet completely believe big government about a secret report. It got slagged off as scaremongering, got slagged off, Yellowhammer got slagged off as being scaremongering. It was out of date when it was published, August. And this is fundamentally unhelpful. And actually, believe it or not, it gets worse. Okay, so in the light of Yellowhammer, I contacted the Sunday Times. I sent them the same files that Newsnight had been sent on the basis that let's see if anything's changed since I leaked the stuff in March. And in fact, I can give you the exact plan of what has changed since March. That's right. Absolutely nothing. Nothing, okay? The present Royal Call physicians, basically the Royal Call physicians confirmed in today's Sunday Times that nothing has changed. No one's contacted the Royal Colleges. So let's think about this, okay? Let's say we all believe in no-deal Brexit. I know that's a tough gig in this audience, but that's theoretically what you would do is you would speak to the experts, you'd speak to the Royal Colleges, you'd listen to their advice, you'd design a plan of mitigation, you'd then test it out, okay? See if it worked. If there were problems, you'd fix them. This is what they've done. Nothing, okay? So, and it's also worse than that with prorogation. I'm going to explain this because I've got a couple of friends of mine from the Netherlands who are very welcome. Prorogation is a process by which, so if Parliament was between sessions, they would maybe prorogue for a matter of 4 or 5 days. But now, what's happened is by proroguing, nothing will be interrogated. All the stuff I've told you about, the different parliamentary committees cannot bring in the government to ask why, okay? And indeed, the Health Select Committee have been asking these questions for the last 18 months and have been told everything's fine, okay? And yet I've told you nothing has changed since I whistled in March. So I think we should be very worried that actually this really is an affront to democracy. You expect your parliamentary select committees to be scrutinising your government, to be asking the hard questions, and those aren't happening. Worse than that, this morning Michael Gove was on the Marsh Show and arguing that even this week, if a law was passed to block no deal, they'll ignore the law. A fundamental principle of any democracy is you believe in the rule of law. So this goes way beyond whether my patients with epilepsy or my patients with neuropathic pain can get their drugs. But we are at peace, okay? And yet we're using contingency planning as if we are at war, okay? And these plans should not be secret. And the fact that I cannot even use the names of the drugs with colleagues, with you or with anyone else that would make the plans, all the stuff recently you've seen about HRT, which is not Brexit related, but at least it's in the press. There is a debate about it. We can argue about it. And the analogy I would make, I don't know if you saw in the news about a week ago, there was a nuclear accident in Russia, and a number of people in the nuclear power factory died, and the doctors were very upset because no one had told them that it was a nuclear accident. And we are in exactly the same position, in that we are acting like Russia, where this is being kept as a state secret, when it should be absolutely transparent so that we can make proper plans. So whatever your view is about Brexit, I don't think that secrecy is the way forward. I don't think that, let's face it, taking back control was about taking back democracy and election, avoiding unelected bureaucrats, and now we have an unelected bureaucrat, Dominic Cummings, who's now threatening every Tory MP who votes against No Deal next week with deselection. This is truly very scary times, but it's scary for healthcare professionals, it's scary for patients, and it's really, really important we call people out on this. And that is why I'm here.
Well, let's not get this wrong. We're heading for conflict. There are no two ways about it. And I think we have to prepare. And part of the preparation for that is to make sure that we, as David said, hold these politicians to account. Now, I'm the Liberal Democrat parliamentary candidate for Worcester. And one of the things I'm going to be concentrating on when we start the campaign is what comes after Brexit, because I totally agree that whatever's going on at the moment, we've got to prepare for what comes next. And that means building trust, respect, relationships, and really taking action to pull us out of the malaise that we've been thrust into over the last 3 to 5 years by David Cameron and that cohort. But anyway, here we are. We're in Bromsgrove. Sajid Javid is your Member of Parliament. Aren't you lucky, Chancellor of the Exchequer? The absent MP, I hear. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of worried about saying this, and if the press were here, it would cause chaos, and it will probably get out anyway, but I'm going to say it. Is his family and that of the Home Secretary aware of the fear and insecurity that immigrant generations are feeling now? And I'm talking about Priti Patel as well. Those people, right, if you thought Windrush was bad, figures I got this morning of over 3.5 million people are facing being purged from this country that they have called home, not for 3 years, not for 5 years, but for 30, 40 and 50 years, decades, paying tax, building lives, been model citizens in the UK and accepting UK. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to barbaric Britain. It's run by Priti Patel, Sajid Javid and their puppet master, Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings, remember that name. He's the most dangerous sociopath I've ever seen in action in politics. And I've met him. He's a dangerous, dangerous man. Make no bones about it. And we need to be talking to our neighbours. We need to be talking to our congregations about respect, about caring for each other, and about being aware of the dangers of what lies beneath, because believe me, it's rising.
Powerful people always appoint those.
They do. Their families, by the way, and I'm talking about Patel and Javid, their families were welcomed here. They took full advantage of our hospitality, and now they are personally reaping the rewards. And that is fantastic. But how dare they collaborate with the nouveau fascists that are rising, not in some dark corner of a pub, but in number 10 Downing Street. How dare they collaborate? Sajid Javid, your Member of Parliament, should be absolutely ashamed of himself, and I hope you agree. I'll go gently because I'm a bit upset. One of the things that I said yesterday when I looked up at the cathedral, and I'm from Worcester, I didn't kind of pop in there, I'm from there, and the cathedral was amazing for me in my childhood. It felt so good to be there, it felt so strong to be there. We used to be chased by the wardens, the services were on, and we were causing chaos in the crypt. It was bloody heaven, it was great. And when they chased us, we went off down the river, and we played on the canal. It was wonderful. And I looked up at that cathedral yesterday and I thought to myself, it just came out. I thought, we are the people. And I thought, we are the people. And we've got to be the people. We've got to rise up and we've got to be strong and we've got to be the people. We've all got to take action to stop what's going on. And it kind of felt good looking at the cathedral because that is our rootedness in Worcester anyway. That really is our rootedness. And I believe that we have to feel the strength, we have to build the strength to tackle what's coming.
And St John's here in Bromsgrove.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm not local, so yeah. Proroguing Parliament that leads to no-deal Brexit, in my view, is reckless. It's reckless with our economy, it's reckless with security and peace. And the elected representatives really should be left to continue to find a solution, because they are representatives. And the point you're making, David, is the representatives are been completely overlooked and undermined. A no deal left to Dominic Cummings and other unelected ideologues is dangerous beyond recklessness. It's completely undemocratic, and as I've suggested, I think it will cause civil disorder. And this is why the Liberal Democrats, the Labour Party, the Scottish National Party, the Greens and Plaid Cymru, we are going to work together. We're going to work together to hold this hard right-wing government to account, and we all must work together. We've got to talk to our leaders. I talk to Jo Swinson on occasion, and I say to her, we must work with the Labour Party. We must work with the Greens. This is too serious what's going on. So how that's going to happen, I don't know. I will be prepared to stand aside in Worcester if it helps, but we have to have the lead from the party for that. I'm telling you stuff you already know here, but John Bercow, the Speaker of the House, is very clear that the purpose of this undemocratic act, he said, cannot be dressed up. He says it's obvious that the purpose is to stop MPs debating Brexit, and especially no-deal Brexit. The Prime Minister denies this, which in my view reinforces one simple fact. I'm sorry to name it, I'm sorry to call it out, but Boris Johnson is a liar. And listening to David today, he's made it absolutely abundantly clear, and he drives me on with that news from my own personal experience as well, that he must be held to account. And part of that is to be brave enough to call him a liar. Is because this morning, as we've just heard on the Andrew Marr show, or wherever it was said, Gove said he actually intends to disobey the law. The rule of law, which is our democracy. Let's repeat what David said. Our democracy is built on it. We can't allow that to happen. The people in Bromsgrove, talk to your neighbours. Each one of you recruit 100 people that agree you will not let them take our democracy away from us. Because if we do, our children aren't safe. So we've got to fight from that perspective. Something I feel quite strongly about, been from the faithful city, sorry Bromsgrove, but you did invite me. And the Tories, they've really embarrassed the Queen. Now in our history and in our sort of DNA, we kind of know what that means. Wars have been fought over this. Now Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings have positioned her. She had no choice, as you know, but to agree with the minister's advice. And don't forget the person that was skulking in the background there, who shot out of that limousine at Balmoral, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob Rees-Mogg. Do not ignore Jacob Rees-Mogg. Very close to Dominic Cummings. Very close. These dangerous dictators have exposed Her Majesty's powerlessness in this situation, making Her Majesty look like Cummings' glove puppet. I'm furious about that, and I hope you are too. I can't hear you. Are you furious about it? Good. Because there goes our democracy been undermined. Part of the whole point of the royal family been there is that there is some kind of level of accountability beyond the people, etc., etc. Totally undermined by these two. Shame on Boris Johnson, shame on Dominic Cummings, and shame on the Conservative Party. They can never recover from this.
Shame on you.
Let's talk democracy. They talk about the democratic will of the people. Well, who voted for Boris Johnson? Who voted for no deal? Nobody voted for no deal, and 0.1% of the population voted for Boris Johnson, the Tory membership. That's the size of a big football club or a big football crowd. In my view, what these people are doing is they're selling our sovereignty down the river when they told us they were protecting our sovereignty. As a result of that, there's no power in Worcester. There's no power in Westminster, there's no power in Europe. And now, our MPs, our 600 plus elected members of Parliament have got no power either. I think that is absolutely outrageous. I think we've got to stand against it. They are self-seeking liars, we've got to name it. They have grabbed power for themselves, and do you know what I think? What I think is they are now in a position where Brexit is neither here nor there. They've got what they really wanted, and that is power. And that is why we have to fight with all our might to stop them doing what they're doing. I worked in Belfast for years, and we were talking earlier on about the role of the forces and where the forces lie on all of this. And believe me, it's scary. We've got to wake up. We've got to shake people out of their apathy. They're all out there. They're shopping. They're carrying on with life as normal. Life is not normal. Shout from the rooftops, we're in danger, and we must react to it, especially if there's a general election. Sorry about this. I don't want to repeat things that have been said by other speakers and that you probably know anyway. Okay, I think this is important to just reiterate that proroguing Parliament is an affront to democracy, and of course that is going to lead to disintegration within our society. And Johnson really now is hanging out with what I would refer to as quite hardened right-wing, unaccountable, and in my view, dysfunctional traitors. Cummings, he's an angry man who hates society. I know for a fact that he hates the Tories. Can you believe that? He hates the Tories. And I was pondering, what is this man up to? Apparently he's clever. I don't think it's very clever. I think populist politics is actually quite straightforward. Start calling people names, start talking about people taking other people's jobs from them, create division. Pretty straightforward to actually take power in that situation. I thought, no, Dominic Cummings is more clever than that. There's something else going on. Well, my worry is, and I put this to you to think about, he's a sociopath. And I think he's having great fun at the moment watching his power build and watching the disintegration around him. And for anybody that wants a reference point, it's not going to be an academic classic. Just watch Austin Powers, Dr. Evil. But he's playing these ridiculous games, but he's actually succeeded. And the point is that Downing Street is now infiltrated. And I think that is what we really have to face up to. And I hope I'm not driving it home too hard. But by saying that over the last 3 or 4 years, I have watched the Conservative Party shift from broadly reasonable to actually downright dangerous. And I'll leave you with these thoughts. I do think the Conservative Party, and particularly your Member of Parliament, has been involved in destroying our sovereignty and democracy. I believe that they are now involved in undermining the monarchy. They've split the nation. And in my view, the Tories, led by Dominic Cummings, under no circumstances should be allowed to continue to reign over us. And it is a reign now. It's turning into a reign. They shouldn't be allowed to reign over us. I think we have to take action. We have to tackle them. And I think the time for action is going to be the general election. And I would ask everybody here now just to think about how they could get 100 people to vote for a reasonable party. 100 people. Set yourselves a target to go and find 100 people, have the discussion with them, and get them to vote this Conservative government down. Because headed by Dominic Cummings, with puppets like Johnson and Javid doing his sociopathic bidding, are extremely dangerous. So please go and find 100 people. Make it your energy to go and find 100 people. Try and share with them the dangers and try and get them to vote for the reasonable party here that can knock the Conservatives out. Thank you.
Age of, I think, 11 till 18, 20. This is my home. And it is ridiculous that Sajid Javid is now part of the machine that's currently threatening it. Because, and we'll keep this between us, I actually called up Sajid Javid about a year and a half ago. And I basically tried to speak to him and basically asked him, like, what is your plan for this? Your own government experts say that every single scenario for Brexit will make this country poorer. And his response was, people voted for Brexit. I said, but even if it makes it poor, people voted for Brexit. But given that you know that your own experts, that you're part of a government that has done the calculations and says that every single version of Brexit will make us poorer. If you're pursuing that, that means you're trying to make this country poorer. He said, but people voted for it. I feel like, and it's a con, because they know that we didn't vote for a no-deal Brexit. They know that. Because they wouldn't have spent their entire Brexit campaign telling us that anyone who suggested we wouldn't get a free trade deal was Project Fear. So let's go back down to the basics of the situation, because one of the reasons why I come to events like this is so I can speak to you, so you know how to speak to the people in your lives, because that's the only way we fix this. By speaking to literally everybody you can get a handle on, especially those people that you haven't had a chance to speak to before, people who you felt you couldn't really approach. You need to have that conversation because the country depends on it. So where are we right now? 52%, 51.9, voted for Brexit. But as we have seen, day by day for the past 3 years, that can be a vast number of things, ranging from no deal, Theresa May's deal, a Norway-style deal, Malta's Compromise A, Malta's Compromise B, Norway plus, Norway plus plus, Canada plus, Canada plus plus plus, Canada plus 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 plus. It has a vast range of things that it could be. So, what says which Brexit did people vote for? Is there any evidence of that? No. Well, not from 2016. The only opportunity this country has had to say what sort of Brexit has democratic support is the 2017 general elections, where every single party presented their own vision for what they would do with Brexit. And 54% voted for parties whose manifestos explicitly ruled out a no-deal Brexit. That's because the Labour said we will reject no deal, Lib Dems said that there'd be a second referendum, SNP said that we stay in the single market, the Greens said that we stay in the single market, and then all the other parties basically getting more and more less Brexity than that. So there is no mandate for a no-deal Brexit at all, because essentially the population ruled it out in 2017. So we've now got a Prime Minister that wants to shut down Parliament to deliver a version of Brexit that the people don't want, that he swore would never happen. In 2016 he said it would be absolutely absurd if there were to be tariffs between us and the rest of the EU, that the Germans would never put tariffs on our products because they need to sell us cars. But what does no deal actually do? No deal is an instruction to the EU that they have to apply their general tariffs to UK products. Because that's what WTO rules say. You hear all the stuff about World Trade Organization rules, all that stuff? One of those rules is, whatever tariff you apply to everybody has to be applied to anybody you don't have a free trade deal with. So the EU would be forced to apply tariffs to our products. It's not the EU punishing us, it's us punishing ourselves. Now, what half of the cars that we make in this country we sell to the EU. In many factories it's well over half. Half of the lamb, half of the fish we catch in this country, we sell to the EU. A third of Welsh lamb goes to the EU. A no deal is an instruction that all those products need a tax on them. That's jobs in this country. People did not vote for that. The entire narrative of they need us more than we need them. We'll hold all the cards. We're the fifth greatest economy in the world. That was based on the idea that we would dominate the negotiations and get any deal we wanted. That's not no deal at all. So when you have this conversation as to what no deal actually means, forget all the impact assessments, forget the economic forecast, because clearly they're not convincing enough. Put it in these terms. Is there a country in the world that doesn't have a single trade deal with anyone within 2,000 miles? Is there one? No. That's a no-deal Brexit, which means that if we do that, we're doing something that every successful economy on the planet Earth has chosen specifically not to do. Use your own head, ask yourself whether that will make us richer or poorer. Their response will be, don't worry, no deal is only temporary. At which point you should say, hang on, so you're not okay with the deal we just negotiated because you think that the EU strong-armed it, and it means we don't fully leave in the way you wanted to leave, etc., and you think we'll get a better deal if we leave. Do the maths here. If we leave the EU without a deal, that means that trade with our 27 closest economic partners becomes more expensive. From the EU's perspective, its trade with just one of their economic partners becomes more expensive. Mathematically, by a scale of 27, a no-deal Brexit hurts us more than it hurts the EU. because their GDP, their total economy, is 5 times the size of ours. They have 5 times the population size, which means consumers. This will hurt us significantly more. Yes, it'll be bad for the EU, but for us, losing trade with 27 of our closest economic partners, not a good plan. And so if we couldn't get the deal we wanted before we left, in that situation, having been hurt more than the EU, we'll be in an even weaker negotiating position. So we'll only end up with a deal that even Brexit voters do not like themselves either. And if we end up with a Brexit that neither Brexiteers nor Remainers like, the country will tear itself apart. That is one of the things that scares me the most about this entire thing, because there is no guarantee if we leave with a deal that Brexit voters will like the outcome. And that will leave us in a Brexit purgatory that will last a generation. Now, they'll then say, well, don't worry, we don't need the EU. We don't need to have a trade deal with you. We'll have a trade deal with other countries around the world. And they'll point to America. Donald Trump. I feel like Donald Trump isn't going to put the needs of the UK first. I don't remember his inauguration speech saying Birmingham first, or London first, or Manchester first. I think it was something to do with America first. Now, last year he spoke to a group of, he spoke at a rally where he promised his own people he needs to elect him, that any trade deal he did would involve ending what he called the global freeloading of healthcare. That means that's a system whereby countries outside of the US pay less for their drugs than America does. For example, the UK pays about 1/3 of its price for its drugs than America pays. And so his plan is to basically force the countries he makes trade deal with to pay more for drugs so that American companies pay less. And he explicitly said on TV in this country that the NHS would be on the table in negotiations. He then went back on that, obviously, because if he then realised that if we realised that our main trade alternative post-Brexit wanted to dismantle the NHS, we'd abandon Brexit pretty sharpish. But ultimately, he's promised the people he needs to elect that our NHS is on the table. So our choices if we leave with a no-deal Brexit are, we end up in a weaker negotiating position with the EU, or we end up the only country in the world that doesn't have any trade deals with anyone in its hemisphere, or we end up selling off the NHS to Donald Trump. It's a lot to put on side of a bus, isn't it? And so ultimately, the only option is a referendum, but that requires our Parliament to basically get back to work, because Boris Johnson's plan is horrendously undemocratic. Shutting down Parliament in the name of parliamentary sovereignty is the most crazy thing I've heard in this entire thing. Because in 2016 he said, what did he say? He said that our parliamentary sovereignty is under threat and it's the vehicle through which people express their power. And now he's shutting down that precise vehicle. So when you're speaking to people, you need to have a conversation on their level. Ask, and don't come at them with your opinions. Ask them theirs first. Ask them what they think of this entire Brexit process. You'll find common ground because we all think it's going just great. And then you say, what did you want from Brexit? They'll say sovereignty, control. And that's a totally legitimate thing to want, because we have a first past the post system, which means that millions of votes literally mean nothing in this country. I personally, being from Bromsgrove, my vote has never made a difference at all. So that desire to want to take back control should be something we all share. And under all versions of Brexit, be it the deal we just negotiated, which means we follow the rules of the EU with no say, whereas right now, as a member of the EU, the UK has 73 of the 750 members of the European Parliament, which means we have 3 times the voting power of the average EU country. To give that up in favour of following the rules with no say is the exact opposite of taking back control. Or we leave with no deal and end up puppets to Donald Trump. There is no version of Brexit that fulfills the things that they wanted. So just have that conversation. Have it on their terms. Speak in terms of sovereignty. Don't come at them waving an EU flag in their face. They'll see it as an attack. Just ask them what they want and whether or not it's being delivered. That's how we have that conversation. Thank you.
That's the one with the vision paper. You'll be on the advertiser this week.
Sorry, phone call there just for a moment. Apologies if I'm walking a bit like Frankenstein's monster. I pulled my back a couple of days ago, so I'm definitely not going to use that. It's been excellent listening to the guys who've spoken before me. I'm not a professional at this kind of stuff. These guys, activists, very, strong professionals in their own lines of work. I'm just an ordinary bloke. I've done a bit of time for my country, you may have noticed. I'm oddly proud of my medals, and therefore I know a little bit about dictatorship. Guess where this conversation's going? I fought in the Gulf War, and I wasn't sat in Cyprus on a little bunker, nice and safe. I was out on the front line. Not fun, but I know what Saddam Hussein did. I know what he did to the people of Kuwait and of his own country, and you all do from the news. I also did 2 tours of the former Yugoslavia. I know what Karadzic and Milosevic did to their people. The first thing they did was take over the parliament. We know where this is going in this country. But Boris, he's lovely, isn't he? Isn't he a lovely, fun-filled fellow? He's like a big blonde Furby. Come on, we all trust Boris. He's so positive. It's fantastic listening to him on the news. And when he does that thing in his pockets, doesn't he look like Winston Churchill? Doesn't he make you proud to be British? But there's another side to Boris. That's called Alexander. Now, hopefully you all know his real name is Alexander Johnson. He likes Boris because he's that blonde Furby we're all talking about. Unfortunately, Alexander is a psychopath. Don't take my word for it. A chap called Robert Hare in the 1970s came up what was known as the psychopath test. It's a list of 20 questions they use in criminal prosecutions to identify who is a psychopath. I have a couple of examples. He's charismatic. Oh, Boris is charismatic, isn't he? He's lovely. He's a habitual liar. Well, we know about that one as well, don't we? Just about everything that comes off of his pen or out of his mouth is designed for Boris Johnson. Nobody else. He's been in legal and criminal trouble. Well, we know that from Boris as well, don't we? I don't know how many times he's been thrown out of office, and didn't he do such a great job as Foreign Secretary? That poor lady who's still in prison in Iran had her sentence extended due to the competence of our now Prime Minister. Does it make you sick? There's no empathy or sympathy. We know that's Boris all over as well. And that's just 4. But don't take my word for it. Robert Hare, Google it now, have a look at those 20 questions, and I guarantee you he ticks every box. The really worrying thing about our government at the moment is not Boris, and Stephen mentioned it, Femi mentioned it, and David mentioned it. It's Dominic Cummings. There's the puppet master. There's the guy who really is pulling the strings. He has no interest in the conventions of politics, parliament or government. He doesn't care. It doesn't affect him. He's the guy who's pulling Boris Johnson's strings. He's the guy who told him to go against all convention and prorogue Parliament. If what we're doing now, ladies and gentlemen, if what we do now doesn't work, on the 31st of October, and Dominic Cummings is sat next to the fire alarm in the Houses of Parliament and things are not going his way, it will be his elbow that decides what happens in Parliament. He, I think, is that unscrupulous, he would close Parliament by all direct means. And I wouldn't put anything past him. Horrible individual. So we're talking about the proroguing of Parliament. It is the first act of a dictatorship, is to close down votes. It doesn't matter whether you voted Remain or Brexit. Our MPs are our representatives in Parliament. They are our voices. And this, of course, is true for the European Parliament. We vote for our members of that Parliament, as Femi said, 700 odd of them. When the government decides to close this down, that is taking away our voice. Whether you're a Remainer or a Brexiteer, it's stopping it. What should be happening is the complete opening of Parliament and get rid of the conference season. All it's there for is for political parties to organise money. That's all it's for. Surely our future is more important than political parties earning their money. They can do that next year. Now is the time for the Parliament to sit all the way through until this nightmare is sorted. Now there's one thing, I rarely disagree with Janet, but saying in the morning, I want to remain, it's not good enough, ladies and gentlemen. It's I'm going to remain. I'll be damned if this country is going to leave the European Union over my dead body. Simple as that. And I gave this promise in Birmingham. I'm going to fight with the very last sinew in my body to make sure that the people of this country get their voice and that we stay where we're supposed to be. We are supposed to be in Europe. We are strong in Europe. We lead in Europe. We are not a cowards. We're not cowards on this little island of ours. You know, we're military hawks. We are. We're a nuclear power. Same with the French. Whenever we go on operations in the military, there was always the UK, the French, and the Dutch. Always supported by the Germans, the Poles, the Czechs, etc. So it's a big, nasty world out there. There's a lot of countries who want to do us pain and misery. Look at Donald Trump, he's been mentioned. What a great man he is. Vladimir Putin is far more dangerous because he's far more intelligent. And of course, his Prime Minister, well, Sasha, perhaps we should call him. Yeah, poor Boris, he's going to be lost in this. But Vladimir Putin is dangerous. China are dangerous economically. We need to stay part alongside our friends and allies in Europe. This is bigger than the world itself. We have to look after ourselves and our friends. So, a final point, ladies and gentlemen. Boris, lovely Furby Boris. He'll promise you the world. He really will, and has done so on several occasions. He wants to be king of that world. But Alexander won't deliver anything of it. You know it and I know it. He's a habitual liar. And proroguing Parliament is the second most cowardly act that this country has ever done. It hasn't been done yet. The first most cowardly act is Brexit.